the first site we'll be visiting is the Broadland and South Norfolk District Council offices, which was formerly an Aviva call centre, and there was a change of ownership following COVID. The site itself has got almost 800 kilowatts of solar, so quite a lot of solar for a single office, and that's a combination of rooftop solar that we didn't complete and then a carport project that we did in 2019. And when this was modelled, that was providing 35% of the site's energy, which was a 1,000-person call centre, which was quite an achievement, we felt. Originally forecast as an 11-year payback on that carport, but as I'll go on to explain, that has subsequently improved to a 7-year payback, which I think part of my messaging wants to be that the sort of right time to do things was yesterday, but today will be fine. Embedded CO2, that's obviously a key driver for a lot of people. Carports in particular are more material than rooftop solar, but we've gone to great lengths to come up with a sort of very low impact system that we've considered all of those components to make it as low embedded carbon as possible, because obviously as we approach net zero, often the best thing to do from that perspective is not to build anything new, keep the old stuff, but of course that's not going to help us get to where we need to be in terms of grid energy and so on. So I'd like to touch on some of these themes a little bit more. Innovation. So the project we'll see, and I'm going to refer a lot to Aviva, but it is Broadland and South Norfolk's office now, but Aviva were our client at the time. It was our first commercial solar carport in the UK. It was one of the first solar carports in the UK. They were gaining some popularity in Europe, much sunnier climates, but in the UK, with our irradiance and the cost of energy, it wasn't quite there yet. But it was somewhat of a prototype, and considering that this was pre-COVID and pre the Ukraine price crisis that we saw, I think it was that has to be celebrated. It was sort of quite a step into the unknown in some regards. To me, that's a real testament to the corporate leadership and how important that is into blazing a trail for other people to follow. We do need people with, frankly, deep pockets and ambitious ESG targets to do some of these things and prove that the concept works, and then smaller private businesses can follow suit. Credit to Aviva, and particularly Preston. I won't embarrass him, but he is here today. He was our client. He was our sort of champion within Aviva. He no longer works for Aviva, I'll add, but not because of his investment in a carport, I hasten to add. He really was a champion of us, Ren Energy, but also of doing something a little bit different. They'd already done lots of rooftop solar. No one had really even noticed. And so when they were doing this, it was a very conspicuous display of their ESG agenda. And as I just mentioned, even back in 2019, CapEx was quite a bit lower than it would be today because of aforementioned inflation that we've all suffered, but with lower energy prices and also some of the export curtailment that site has, which I'll explain in more detail when we're walking around, we were forecasting an 11 to 12-year payback, which is not bad, but it's not particularly exciting for a lot of corporate investors. They can often do better things with their money, but as I mentioned, it was an ESG investment. Aviva have a very ambitious target for decarbonisation, and so they knew they needed to be making some of these decisions that weren't necessarily the most exciting financial return, but they were going to deliver on some of their other targets. And that, I suppose, driver really helped us to formulate the low impact solution that we've now delivered for numerous businesses around the UK. We've deliberately designed something that has got as lower embedded carbon as is practical, as is reasonable. So UK manufactured steel, they're here. Well, UK manufactured frame, they're here today, so we can have a chat with them. We use screw piles rather than concrete foundations to avoid any use of concrete. The UK manufacturing of both of those components means we've got lower transportation miles and so on and so forth. European manufactured inverters rather than shipping from Asia. So where possible, we've chosen the right supply chain. Where possible, we're making it in the UK with a low carbon grid. Rather than just focusing on making the cheapest possible product, it's about getting that balance. And so I think Aviva, being a sort of anchor client, helped us to kind of go down that road, and then that's allowed us to help numerous other companies deliver these types of systems. So, Aviva then did a secondary project up in Perth. That's a grade 1 listed site. So it's almost a national monument in some regards. And that's now helping that to be more sustainable. We've worked with the MOD. So down at BAE, there's the Portsmouth Naval Base. So if ever you're getting the ferry into Portsmouth, that's highly visible as you're coming in to the port. We've got Northumberland County Council, bottom left. That was a very exciting project. That's combined with battery storage and lots of rapid EV charging as well. And then Surrey County Council, we've actually done 2 projects for them. And in the not too distant future, we're actually going to be relocating one of those. So that'll be the first carport we've built and then subsequently dismantled and relocated to another site, which is, I think, a really fundamental part of the narrative, is that, people often worrying that they don't know what their site might be in 5 years' time, whether they'll be there, whether they need to redevelop. But if we can try and develop some flexibility, Damien's redeveloped the site 3 or 4 times, you've got flexibility to do things, and I think take advantage of the opportunity now, and then we can reappraise and readdress in future. So speculate to accumulate. So, none of us have a crystal ball. The pandemic came along in 2020. Aviva vacated that office. That's a 1,000-person call center, empty. So that massively reduced their energy consumption, and therefore that massively elongated the return on investment. They'd made a decision based on using the energy. Now they weren't using the energy. No one could see that coming. But likewise, no one saw the Ukraine crisis coming, which has subsequently more than doubled the cost of energy at the meter that we modelled it on. And so on recalculation, if Aviva, hypothetically, was still in that building, the return on investment would have changed from just over 11 years to approximately 7 years, which means that at some point between this summer and next summer, it would have been all bought and paid for. And then they've got 20, 30 years left on that asset, generating very cheap energy. A bit cheesy, this is my JFK moment possibly, but we can never know the right time to do something, but we can know that it is the right thing to do. And I think that's really important, because lots of the conversations I have with potential clients are always around whether or not there's going to be a cheaper alternative, a new technology. Are we going to invent nuclear fusion? All this sort of stuff. And obviously we don't know the answer to that, but if we make some decisions now based on what we think is right, and we're investing for the right reasons, more often than not, we see that it pays off and actually does a lot better than we first thought. So this is like one of those tabloid newspaper graphs where the axes sort of change, but this is the payback zone here. So it just shows that the payback improved to the green had they been there. But of course, you may or may not know, but Aviva decided to sell that building. They had no need for the 1,000-person office. They decided to reuse other offices, work from home, all these types of things. Now, on the face of it, that could be seen as a wasted investment in some regards, because they've spent that money, and then a year or so later, they're looking to sell the office. But far from it. What could have been a very costly stranded asset sitting there for years on their balance sheet, they actually managed to shift relatively quickly for commercial property, because it attracted a couple of keen-eyed new buyers in the form of Broadland and South Norfolk District Council, who saw that as an opportunity to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They were operating in separate offices. They were old, inefficient, not particularly fit for purpose, and they were able to combine their resources and get a nice new environmentally sustainable, relatively cheap to run office space. And with that more space, and with the abundance of renewable energy, they've also been able to lead by example. So they've now facilitated some additional low carbon office space for other tenants. So other sort of agencies within the council have office space there that would otherwise had to have been higher carbon options elsewhere. They are able to accelerate their electrification of heating and transport. So similar to us, looking to put more EV chargers in, EV fleet, and they've changed to a heat pump, so electrifying their heating system because they've got an abundance of cheap green energy. And also from a portfolio approach, so I don't know if we've got any portfolio managers here, but it's a big problem, I think, for local authorities in general, is quite a lot of the property is pretty old. It could be sort of agricultural, and it's quite difficult for them to balance the books, so to speak. So there's a good option there. So A few graphs to finish off with here. So this is really probably quite hard to interpret here, but so 2019 was the installation, and as you can see, we were providing a relatively small, sort of 35% of the energy. I actually don't know what happened in 2021. There must have been running some tests or something because energy went off the chart, but we were effectively providing about 35% of the Aviva load. When that turned to a council office, they were having a significantly lower demand. They didn't have as many people in there, they don't have servers and all the like of it, which is obviously leading to more curtailment of the system because we can only export a certain amount of energy from the site. But that is allowing them to think about what they can do with that extra energy and how they avoid the curtailment. So in 2023, a bit more detail. You can see here that when the council's in, we're providing a huge amount. That yellow is what's provided by solar. So it is nearly all of their energy at that point was being provided by solar energy. That's how oversized the system was. But then in 2024, the installation of a heat pump, which was facilitated by having that extra energy, make that decision to use more electricity to heat, massively increases their demand. So reduces the amount of self-sufficiency, but obviously that energy is effectively free. So it's decarbonising, it's more efficient, there's lots of good news stories there. Yeah, and I think we've got people here from the council, but next step would be to put a battery there, and I'll give them my business card later. Right, that's me done, I think.